Hi, I'm Heather Landy, executive editor at Quartz and editor of Quartz at Work. And I'm joined today by Rob Falzon, vice chair of Prudential Financial. Prudential's Pulse of the American Worker Survey launched back in 2017, but I dare say this has been by far its most interesting year yet. The survey involves 2,000 full-time employees working across industries, age groups, and job levels. This latest Pulse survey, launched in October, is the second in the series conducted during the pandemic. Rob, it is pretty clear from your survey and probably also just from your experience now of living through 2020 that the office won't be used or thought of in the same way that it was before. So how are you thinking about it at Prudential? What do you think will be different going forward? And how do you think employees will adjust to it?
Well, so I think about the future of the workplace needs to reflect the future of work. And I actually think what's happened is the pandemic and the remote experience that we've all shared in the pandemic has crystallized, I think, a view of what we want to do when we're in the office as contrasted to the way in which we used the office before the pandemic. And so if you think about the future of work and the increased use of digital technology, it is, I think it was an acceleration that occurred by virtue of the pandemic, and it's something that we're going to carry forward into the workplace. But what we've realized is we can get a lot done at home. I mean, the reality is remote works, right? And you saw that in the survey, right? 75% of the survey respondents indicated that remote was relieving a tremendous amount of stress for them, as a result of the pandemic. And it was like 60% or more, I don't remember the specific statistic, that said that, they actually thought their productivity was higher from being remote than when they were in the office. And so it's working. The implication of that is remote's here to stay, and the future of the workplace is going to have to reflect that future of work, which is a combination of increased digital, increased technology, as we've talked about many times in the past, and increased remote that's enabled by all of that. And so when you think about the design of space and the layout, it's going to have to look quite different and utilized. And we're happy to talk about that in terms of how we're thinking about it. But we've got a major repurposing of our space that we're contemplating as and when we bring people back into the workplace.
It seems like what we need for the office now is to make use of it the way that I think people want to make use of it would be for collaborative space, because right now we can do the independent sort of deep work, the independent work at home. But the pandemic doesn't really allow for that kind of cohesion in physical contact right now. So how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so we're looking to the other end of the pandemic as we're thinking about space planning. In terms of returning to the workplace, it's working pretty well. Now, it's not that it doesn't have issues, and we can talk about those, but there are some shortcomings. But by and large, as I indicated, it's working well for companies like ours, service-oriented companies particularly. And so we're not in a rush to pull people back into the workplace to work socially distant in the office. It's sort of like it defeats the purpose of coming back into the office. And as I mentioned before, the crystallization of what we're going to be using the office for is actually around collaboration, ideation, planning, meeting, conferences. It's the reason we come together. And I think I've shared with you once before, Heather, that if we thought about how people came to work and what they did when they were at work, the statistics before were 30% of the time people were out of the office and 70% of the time they were in the office. But when they were in the office, they were spending most of their time in the office on their computers or whatever individual work, and a minority of their time working together with each other. And we think those ratios flip-flop, that people will be in the office much, much less. They are enjoying the remote capability. It'll be a hybrid model, at least in our case, we're contemplating that. And then when they're in the office, we're gonna be knocking down a lot of offices and creating a lot of open space, meeting space, collaboration space, and we're actually using the period between now and when we bring people back into the office to get all that work done. We've begun doing it already, so that when they come back, they'll come into a very new experience, a very different experience than what they left.
What are you looking to in terms of the signals that you need to be able to plan that far ahead, right? So broad distribution of vaccines is finally something that is within sight. And so how will you know when the time is right to bring people back and to reconvene in person?
Yeah, so as I indicated, we're not in a rush. And so we're going to be pretty patient about it. And our first priority is around sort of the health and well-being of our employees. And we're going to be very careful with that. A vaccine, as is, has been in the news recently, is quite a lot of help as that gets rolled out and becomes, more broadly available. But it has to include infrastructure where people feel safe traveling on mass transit, where they have the care they need for the home, right? So kids have to be back in school, daycare has to be up, elder care has to be available. The infrastructure that allows them to come back into the workplace for the days that they'll be back into work. Those are all the things that we're looking for. So, a vaccine being available, great. When it gets rolled out, better. When at that point when people are comfortable then using mass transit, and when they feel that there's a support infrastructure available to them, that's when we'll be bringing them back in. So I don't think that'll be that far off. I think it's a 2021 event, but I don't think it's an early 2021 event.
In the meanwhile, Rob, what do you think is being lost in terms of company culture, and what is it that companies can do to combat that?
Yeah, so there is this gradual decay, I would call it, in learning and culture the longer we say 100% remote. And you see it again in the statistics in the survey that we did. Some 40-ish% of the individual survey felt like there were much more limited career opportunities for them in this remote environment than when they were in the office. And a third or so of them felt that the ability to learn on the job was much more difficult when you're fully remote than when you got the ability to sort of interface directly with people. And then there was like 60% that felt, or maybe it was 50% that felt that they wanted more skilling. And so you see that there is this deterioration. That's sort of, I call that sort of the point on the spear in terms of that decay in learning and culture. And so you have to be paying a lot of attention to that. There are real risks to an organization if that goes on for too long a period of time. There are things I think you can do while you're remote. And then obviously once we're back into the office, even in a hybrid model, I think much of that gets addressed. We have, fortunately, we're investing in something we call the Accelerator, which is a digital-based sort of skills mapping tool that we had married to our training and our development, and that we also married to something we're now calling the talent marketplace. And that has been a godsend for us, quite honestly. Before the pandemic, we had less than a quarter, like 20% or so of our employees who had actually engaged in this accelerator, which involves putting your resume into it. So it breaks your resume down into a resume of skills as opposed to experiences, and then allows you to map that to jobs. Now we're at like 85% of the relevant employee population that have engaged with our accelerator, because in a remote environment, they're recognizing that's an important tool. It gives them the ability to then take their skills, figure out where else in the organization they can apply those skills. And if there are gaps, there's a whole training curriculum that allows them to reskill or upskill in order to be able to close those gaps. So I think it's important that companies invest in the skilling while we're out of the office as heavily as they would, if not frankly more heavily than when we were in the office, in order to address that decay rate.
That sounds like such an important counterbalance to other signs that we're seeing from various surveys, that automation is expected to increase as a result of the pandemic, or at least happen on an accelerated timetable. And so if you can work with your existing workforce and help them see today where they need to be tomorrow, because there are some jobs that just aren't going to be around
Yeah.
anymore, that feels really essential. The pandemic's been stressful for everyone, but there's a type of stress that's probably very specific to managers right now. In your most recent survey, 71% of managers with remote teams said the pandemic has added a great deal of stress to their own lives. 52% said they feel more burned out from work than they did before the pandemic. They're
Yeah.
concerned that they need more resources to help their teams operate remotely and stay as productive as they need to be. They're concerned about attrition. And they say that managing a remote team is adding more hours to their workday. 53% agreed with that. What is your advice right now to managers, and how are you handling at Prudential your management staff to make sure they get the support they need to get through this?
Yeah, so I want to acknowledge everything you said and you saw in the survey first, Heather, which is that while I've stated remote work is working, the pandemic is a grind. And I think you said you have to separate out the experience of working remotely from the experience of working remotely in a pandemic. And managers are getting caught in the squeeze because what they're dealing with is that stress in their employee base, their team, that they're trying to help through managing that stress, yet they're feeling it in their own lives as well. And so they kind of get caught on both ends of that. And to your point about working longer, everyone is working longer. I thought some of the interesting statistics in the survey that you were just referencing is people on average have saved an hour of commuting time, right? But about 60% of that has been reinvested into actually a longer workday as opposed to more free time. And level of vacations that have been taken, like 2/3 the level that have been taken in the prior year. So people aren't taking time off. They've reinvested their commuting time back into work time. And there's this sense of borderless days, no beginning and no end of the day. It all sort of blurs. And so it's challenging for everyone, and as we said, particularly for managers. We're concerned about the burnout, that greater than 50%, and we are seeing it firsthand with our own employees. And so, a couple things to think about on this. First, there is, as you mentioned, a real challenge in managing remotely. It's a new skill for many of these managers, particularly for junior managers. You're used to judging people if you were here early and you were here late. You must be working really hard. Well, now I don't see you at all. And I've got to judge you on not inputs, but outputs. And that's a learning. And so we're actually investing in training and helping people to learn how to manage, not just in a remote model, but frankly, in a sustained remote model where you need to have a better sense for how to manage and create metrics around outputs, not just inputs. But we're also trying to take care of people. And so we've provided free assistance around mental health care and benefits around dependent care as well, in order to step in and try to help with what is a crisis on the home front right now. And so we're trying to marry skill development along with aid in order to help people manage their way through this, and then encouraging people to do things like blackout times. No meetings during certain hours of the day, no meetings, Fridays if you can do that, or certain days of the week. In fact, we're at the point where we'll be rolling out next year, sort of mandatory across the entire company, no meetings on like the last Friday of every month or something, just to make sure that everyone is equally adopting this, to kind of force people to sort of disengage from the screens, so they can get a little bit more control of both their work and their personal lives.
It sounds like something we all could use. Thank you so much, Rob. We really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you, Heather. Good to talk to you again.